Hi, everybody. Welcome to the FreeMind Podcast. It is Thursday, December 28th, and we're listening to the story of Richard Fierro, co-founder of Atrevida Beer Company out of Colorado Springs, Colorado. Let's jump in and hear Richard's story.
Richard Fierro, F-I-E-R-R-O. I'm the part owner. Me and my wife are the owners of Atrevida Beer Company. We opened in 2018. So we went through a pandemic and then a mass shooting, and then so major critical events around us that have changed and shaped the directions we've gone.
Let's go ahead. I guess we'll open with that there. How do you? A lot of people know if they look up your name or anything like that, they're going to see the connection with the shooting at Colorado Club Q. How have you in the past? It's been a little over a year now, as a family and as a business, coped with that, and then I guess later more so as a community to continue to move on while maintain remembrance.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, I think the community really rallied, and for a community where we don't have a gay community out here. We have a gay place, and that's what got shot up. So when you look at it, the community rallied for a group that they've really not seen in this neighborhoods. You know what I'm saying? So it was one of those things where they finally kind of brought people together, which was really nice, post-wise. So that's the positive out of it, right? And then I think what happened is our message from our brewery and what we've been doing, because we show up for every culture and every community in the Springs because we feel like it's important, right? And so our tagline was "Diversity, it's on tap" before we opened in 18, and Jess put the name around it, and that means bold, daring, audacious woman. We left it that way because she's the one doing this, right? My daughter's in there with her now too, and so the brew stuff, that's all fine and dandy, but you got to get beyond beer if you want to stand out in the market that's so saturated, right? Especially in Colorado. And so we chose to kind of highlight what we grew up with, which was, liking everybody and kind of everybody melting together. And we were known as that couple, the brown couple that was showing up at different breweries, right? So they would easily refer to us. They'd tell the bartender, "Hey, see, you know that Mexican couple?" And they're like, "Oh, Rich and Jess," like, because we were the only ones that were going in. So it was pretty neat. But at the end of the day, that's kind of gave us that idea of, like, let's open it up so that hopefully we can get some folks that haven't touched the craft beer industry and kind of open that market up to them and see if they enjoy it. So we started with Jess started with Beerland, which kind of proved for her that her volunteering for years for free and at different breweries, and then finally doing homebrew to a standard that was really like, it always blew my mind. But she always says it's integrity in a glass, which is a really cool saying. But she knows when she hands a beer over, that's her resume to each customer. And palates are different for everybody, so you have different flavors and stuff. But she really wanted to make that matter. So everything behind our beers is personal to her, stories and just everything. And so I think that's what resonated with folks when they found out, oh, wait a minute, he owns a craft brewery and with his wife and his daughter, and they were all there. And so 6 employees and 3 of us were in this shooting. Actually, at that time it was 5. So Tasha and Taylor stepped up. They were brewing. They were put in the front of the house. They were dealing with every phone call for, condolences and all that stuff. But they were also going through it too, just knowing that we were in that danger and we had lost Ray, because Ray was been part of our life for 6 years. So, and then you, Chip and Joanne, who were our best friends that were shot, and they've been participating in the brewery since we opened. So it's a real family thing, right? And just built a family for those 3, or well, it was 5 years when this thing happened. So for 5 years, all those employees came back the first day we reopened after this shooting. And they just threw their bags down and went in the back room and came back out and started serving and working. And that you can't, I don't know how anybody ever does that, but I've never seen a business have past employees come back to help. And that's what happened. It just creates an environment where even when people leave, they still stick around. She's a mentor to most of these folks, and she really values their work. But she doesn't put up with nobody's, she can be a hard boss too. So that's what I think. That's what really is kind of cool is that I get to see her kind of put that into my daughter, and so now my daughter's brewing with her. She's kind of the deputy, if you will, or the VP. Um, so they're both going after it, and I'm just on here for the ride as far as this thing goes. I do all that I can to help with different stuff, but it's mainly at the direction of Jess because what I didn't want to do was convolute that leadership thing, right? I'm a military guy, so there's always a second in command, but that guy needs to defer to, or that girl needs to defer to the leader. And I made it very clear to the employees, listen, you don't come to me, you go to Jess. And I made it very clear for everyone that this is her gig. But I'm there to help and support her as best I can. She did that for me for 15 years in the Army, and it's my turn, and I'm the beneficiary of great beer and hanging out, So it's been really cool. It's been a great experience, and for us going forward, there's a lot of cool things happening. We are set to go into the airport here in Colorado Springs this coming year, and we're getting a new brew house. So she's really starting to ramp up to where we were before the pandemic, and then post pandemic trying to crawl out of that, and then we got hit with this thing. So it's one of those things that right now I think we're at what would have been 2019, 2020. But we're patient, and we we take care of our numbers, so our overhead is as low as we can possibly get it. And so now it's time to really start running.
Absolutely, and not that, and even just the incident we started out with talking about
Yeah.
with the shooting. The two of you are not new to the world of service. I mean, you mentioned there you're 15 years in the military, and she has a long history of not. She didn't sit around and get bored at all when you were in there. She embraced herself and ingrained herself into that world as well, pretty heavily, in a leadership role and a mentorship as well.
Yeah, so she did all the family readiness groups. She helped all the spouses and the children when I deployed 4 times. So she became I guess the veteran spouse, and she was able to, even when I was on my third, I think it's that third or second deployment. And, I had senior ranking guys. I was at the time I was a captain and a major, but I had colonels' wives like asking Jess for advice because they'd never had gone through a deployment, didn't understand it. And it was a lot. And so she kind of raised our kids as a single mom for those, I guess, 5 years that we were in Germany. And then we got here in 2007, and she wanted to branch out and start doing her thing because the kids were older now. And I mean, not by old, but I mean like 7 and in the teens. And so she actually started with cosmetology, and she fell in love with beer in Germany, which was hilarious because I was finally sick of paying for all these expensive drinks, and I'm like, dude, the beer is €1.50. I'm like, you got to get the beer, man. It's so much better than America. And so she was convinced, and we went to a Helen Farewell at a brewery called Wildebräu in Plankstadt, and that's where she fell in love with the process. And so for her, that became that thing that got her into it, and it kind of started fomenting those flames. So she gets back to the States here, and we're sitting in a brewery, and she randomly goes, I think I want to brew. And I'm like, well, where did this go from? And like, I'm still in the Army and all this. She just looked over at the brewer at that time. It was or the head brewer, and it was Mark in Smilington, which is about the size of anybody's kitchen. It was a half barrel production, like it was very, very small. And she goes, I want to brew. And he looked at her like, dude, you gotta get your nails beat up. You're like, what? You're a pretty girl. You don't need to do all that. And she's like, no, I'm coming in. He goes, well, what time? And he said 6. And she said, all right, I'll be here. And she spent about 2 years there, just learning how to deal with, stuck mashes and all that stuff that comes along with being a brewer. And then she learned how to formulate. It came to her naturally because she was a color specialist in hair, and so that chemical reaction and how to make things, unique, is really kind of came natural to her, which is amazing. So at the same time, she ended up being a teacher at the cosmetology school, so she's a teacher. My kids are going through school. I'm deploying twice while I was here in Carson as well, as a commander and then as a battalion operations officer. So she really had a lot on her shoulders, but she's used to it, and it's that we are like, she's just the strongest woman I know. And at that point, and going through the things we're going through, I think that's what has been something that kept us together as a family, because she's so strong with that. And her values match mine. And I think that's what's really important, especially in small business. If you don't believe in your values and you don't present that, then you come off as disingenuous, and it's really not something people want to be a part of. So we just kind of live how we are, and that's who we present when we work the brewery. So that's the good fun for us there. So
That's awesome. And
yeah.
and outside of your family, your immediate family, kind of talk a little bit about how you incorporate Mexican heritage and culture into your beer recipes and your flavors.
Yeah, so Jess has a story behind everything, right? So for her, she made it a point that each beer had to have a meaning to it. And we always believe that the last 5% of a beer in its flavor and its taste is the brewer. And if the brewer believes in the beer they're making and not just acting like a robot, then you got a good thing going. It gives it a little bit extra kick. So she's found a myriad of ways to blend in our culture. She blends in multiple cultures. So we've had a Christopher Street beer for the Stonewall, for the LGBTQ community since we opened. She's had Everybody's Welcome, which is for Fannie Mae Duncan, who the first reverse integrated bar in Colorado Springs. So that's a great story. So we actually, I saw it on PBS, at Fannie Mae Duncan in the late 40s, early 50s, owned a bar that was for colors only, but the base was off post right here. Fort Carson was, the soldiers were coming back from the war and they wanted to go take their wives, who were now, a lot of them mixed marriages because of the war. They're bringing back French women and all this other stuff, but they're black guys or whatever. So all of a sudden she had this mixed crowd. But that was okay until the kids here in the spring said, hey, wait a minute, this Cotton Club's got the best music in town. So they started going, and the sheriff's trying to throw white kids out of the black bar because they're not supposed to be there. And her whole thing was, she posted on the thing, everybody's welcome. She posted that on her window, and it was the first place to reverse integrate in the spring. So Jess took that and said, okay, well, let's help the fundraiser they're trying to build a statue for. So let's do a Cotton Club revival. And she had, like 6 or 7 jazz bands come through, all performing free. And it was just a great party of old and young, right? Just folks that wanted to find out what this is about. And then Fannie Mae Duncan's niece was there and looked at Jess and was kind of like, this is the tradition she wanted. She was a strong woman at a point when nobody in that industry was, female and then black on top of it. And she looked at Jess and said, you're doing the same thing with craft beer, like this is awesome. So the beer's called Everybody's Welcome, but that's the story behind it, right? And nobody really gets that, and so she'll take them and go. Like the Juneteenth, I sent her in 2019 a little blurb because my buddy had brought it up. It's like, hey, you gotta do something for Juneteenth, and I'm like, all right. So I sent a little blurb from the encyclopedia about the Big Red Soda, which is a celebratory drink they drink when they found out they were free, and just took that one line and made a beer. And we've had people from Texas go, dude, this is a Big Red, except it's a beer. And I'm like, well, that's what she's trying to do, is just kind of give you those flavors that present culture, not in a way to shove it down your throat, but in a way for you to either engage with it or not. You don't have to do anything with that. But it hopefully will spark some conversation, or at least get you to think about what you're drinking.
Absolutely. And are your products available at other retailers as well, or specifically only on site?
Yeah, right now it's only on site, and that's all because of where we were at, and we were planning on doing a lot of growth, but then COVID hit, and that was about a 2-3 year nightmare. But we survived, which is a great thing, and we've gotten past that. And I think you're seeing it now in this industry, is everybody's leases are coming up, and the leases are becoming what's shutting down small craft breweries because they can't afford. I mean, you're now it's $7, but I mean, we used to sell beer for $4 a pint, and $4 a pint. You look at the square footage and you look at how many beers you got to sell just to stay open, and people are getting prime real estate. It just doesn't work anymore. So you can't pay $30 a square foot and hope that you can make the money every month for years. It's kind of a crapshoot now because folks are changing tastes, or they're changing they've all changed, I think, in this market. Since COVID, folks have changed to a lot more reverted to going, eating at home or eating eating out, but not necessarily partying because folks got used to doing that at home and with their friends at home. So I've seen a lot more folks gathering together at home rather than out. And that's kind of where this industry is still kind of struggling to get folks back out. Unless you're, presenting Disneyland with all the crazy bells and whistles. But for a small business, that's the tough part. And we've watched a lot of restaurants and breweries and a lot of small businesses just kind of not make it. And especially when they hit that lease, that 5-year mark, it's just tough. So, yeah.
And how do you guys for your relationship as far as your balance of your work and your life? Obviously, work and life has to be completely, work's important, but how do you set the boundaries and kind of when your family business as tight knit as you guys are?
Yeah, so it's a great question. Well, for me, one, I stayed working with the military. So I've been a defense contractor for the last 10 years. I just started with U.S. Space Com. So I'm doing what I kind of found as my niche, which was the military thing. And I'm still doing that in the daytime. So for me, that gives us that separation of not everything in our world revolves around the business. I have my thing going, she has her thing going, and we come together when we need to. And we also come together when, there's an event or there's, a reason for it, or she just needs to bounce an idea. But she's using Cassie to do all that stuff too. So it's fun to watch them interact because they really truly don't act like mother and daughter when they're working. She acts like her boss, and there's no back talk, there's none of that stuff. She's an employee. And then 5 minutes later, when they shut the computer down and they come back to the house, or they get done with a brew, they're back to being mother and daughter. So they've really and Jess has drawn that line with all her folks. Like she hangs out with, well, we all do. We take our employees out and we'll go have a drink or we'll go bowling or whatever. We go to movies together just to see everybody wants to see a certain movie, so we all go watch it. She invites them to be personal, but then she also draws the line. We don't talk about work when we're doing the personal thing. And I think that's what people are finding is it works, right? It's not, if you have somebody that actually cares about you, like it's kind of cool when you say, hey, I'm sick, and she's like, oh my God, don't come to work or whatever. Or if you're having a bad day and you can just vent to your boss for a little bit. That's kind of how it's gone. And so for us personally as a couple, I think having me still having that career allows both of us to have that separation when needed. But we spend a lot of time together because, you end up back at the brewery or even when they're at home and they're working on brewery stuff, and I'm actually late on, so she told me to do a write-up or something, and I haven't done it. And so she's going to get yelling at me. She had surgery today, so she's asleep. So it's one of those things where you're constantly doing things for each other, but at the same time, it's fun. We never thought we'd own our own business. I never thought I'd be in the military. I never thought I'd go to combat. I never thought we'd be involved in some kind of mass shooting. And, none of this stuff should have happened to us. But we've dealt with it. There's been a lot of trauma in our life, and we've kind of learned that those events cannot define you. There's two that we think defined us, which is 9/11, because that sent us to war, and then this event, the shooting, because that's made us all combat vets together. And it sounds really weird, but like my battle buddies, one of them sleeps in my own bed. Like that's hard to deal with because mentally you're still trying to get through things. But when you're trying to do it and there's nobody around you that didn't experience the same thing and has different feelings about it and all that stuff, it becomes a challenge. And that's made this year very hard, but we've made it, and we're going to keep going and pushing forward.
I think that's absolutely fantastic. And in looking forward, kind of what are some of the goals and the plans that you guys have for the future of the brewery, and then kind of in the craft beer industry in general? I know you've talked about some pain points and some X and Y axis as they're getting crisscrossed. Kind of, where do you guys see from your perspective where things are going for yourselves and as a whole?
So for us right now, it's about production and getting back onto a large system. It's paid for, and it's arriving in January. So we've got a new 20 barrel house and a bunch of fermenters coming in that we've just sold our old system to get it out of there. So it's really like starting to happen. And so for her, that's going to allow her with the cooperage to start distributing to the local bars and restaurants that are now starting to start ask again, because for a few years there, they were like, no, dude, I'm using Budweiser because it's cheap and I'm not going to pay, premium price for beer when I can't keep anybody in my restaurant. So we're gonna try and do that with the airport. We think it'll be a little bit better because we'll have that exposure of everybody that lands here in the Springs, and the airport's growing tremendously right now. So it's one of those things that we're excited about. Chef Brother Luck's gonna be in there with us too. So it's really like, and it's weird because it's like Des is a TV reality TV, and Chef Brother Luck's a reality TV. So, and we're all in the same neighborhood, So it's like it's really kind of cool in the Springs. So yeah, that's our next thing is distribution within the restaurants of the local area. Canning line we're hoping to do in the next year, but we want to make sure we get this thing dialed in on the new system, and the airport becomes a steady kind of like that normal routine, and then she doesn't have to worry about what she's got to plan for. And then we were looking at Denver's got a lot of folks asking for us too, so we're trying to manage expectations, because for us this is not, we're not a 30-person gig. We don't have tons of space and tons of equipment. We're really trying to build that now, because we with not having invested that money in the beginning and the pandemic happening, we were able to survive the pandemic, continue to pay our employees, and then come out of the pandemic without another load of debt. We are debt free, and that's what we did we do that as for a purpose, because we don't want to have somebody come in and have to save us, right? And then we have to answer to somebody. So she runs this place, it's like a Lean Six Sigma kind of thing, like it's just in time brewing. And she's coined that phrase. She really has. And so it's really neat because she'll get a delivery, and then that stuff gets brewed and it's gone. Like we're not playing around, and she's got it down to a science. And so that's what we're excited about. I think right now it's about growth, and next year for us will be a big year.
I really would like for you to talk for a second about trusting your instincts
Mm-hmm.
and making educated decisions in a moment of stress. And obviously that can be for a lot of different scenarios, but
Absolutely.
I think that's something very fitting for you.
No, yeah, and so for me with the military, I've always been trained as an officer. You're trained to manage chaos, right? So you're always looking for that chaos to get in there and start solving problems and fixing and getting the mission done. I think for folks to really kind of harness the power of their small business, they've got to be realistic about it. There's a lot of folks that have the pie in the sky. If I open this thing and it's great today when I start, but I still haven't really kind of dialed in my product, but I'm going to do a $10 million, buy-in and put up this great real estate and all this system stuff, and your beer is not there yet, you can't go back. What Jess did was, and again, she went back to integrity in a glass. I'm going to make the beer I want to make, and I'm going to do it well. And that means starting on a small system, starting on an old system, and continuing to grow. As the business grows, it goes right back into the business. And so we don't make any money, but the business is not losing money, right? And so that's where, for us, me having this other career also allows us to take care of the business at home, not the business at home, but the dollar figures at home. Because I watched Shark Tank, and they're like, everybody needs to quit and go all in, and I'm like, wait a minute, man. If you do that, then all of a sudden the business becomes what's feeding you, and you're going to be taking from the business. So how does that help you if you're not doing as well as you thought you might? Because everybody looks at it with a optimistic point of view, because you're an entrepreneur, but you got to be realistic with some of this stuff. And I think for me, that's what it's about with the chaos, is making the decision, because for that moment, it's about 80% correct. You're pretty confident that that's good. I'm good with 80%, because the other 20, I can't stop it. Who would have known there would have been a pandemic? Who would have known the shooting would have happened? Who would have known that, like craft beer all of a sudden flips, and we're dealing with all kinds of stuff. Bud Light drops off of the planet, it's chaotic, but that's with any business. It has nothing to do with just beer. Like, you can be selling widgets, but Spacely Sprockets is right next door. You know what I mean? So like, that's what our big thing is. Hey, always be realistic. Always know there's other folks around you trying to do the same thing. What can you do to stand out in a world full of seconds? It's really tough to be the first. And my wife has been lucky enough and fortunate enough to be one of the first to do what she's doing, as for who she is. And I think that for us is what we leaned into, because it separates us from everything else. And for good or bad, that's what we've committed to. And then the values we talked about, it's huge, because that's what keeps us together. That's what's going to keep the business together. That's what kept us paying our employees during COVID. Like, you just have to have values that say what you're trying to present as a business. Because if we don't hang out in anywhere but Latino places, then who are we with diversity? We're fooling ourselves. So we show up, and that's what it's about, showing up.
I couldn't ask for you to put it together any better. Thank you so much, Richard, for your time today. I can't wait to share their draft with you and publish this for everybody else.
All right, Nate. I appreciate the time, and thanks for the asking.
Thank you so much. You take care.
All right. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You looking for a way to grow your business, reach new customers, and increase your sales? If so, you need the FreeMind Group, founded in 2008 and a provider of creative and strategic solutions for the food and beverage industry. Whether you need branding, marketing, product development, or innovation, the FreeMind Group can help you achieve your goals and unleash your potential. Visit our website at thefreemindgroup.com and get a free consultation today. Thank you for listening, and see you next time.